So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find then a layer of understanding of the spring feast, autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries, where we find then precisely then at 61st chapter of Yeshayahu, where he explains then what the Messiah has done, and then later the autumn feast known as vengeance, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. And then also chapter 1:8 of Yeshayahu, we find then the first holy city on the land of Cush, and also the Gentiles included in the plan. So then we find also in the 11th chapter of Daniel the prophet, we find himself, while he was then writing the 11th chapter, most of it was related with the Gentile level, and then also the 10th chapter of Daniel related precisely with China, because Daniel the prophet, he knew he was dealing with a section of our time where then during the second chapter he did not receive a precise leadership of the base of the statue. The base of the statue prior of the 10th and 11th and 12th chapter, it was truly a mystery. So then Daniel, as he went on with his personal obligations, he found himself then in a position where he sensed a lack of completion of the holy instructions related with precisely the time of the Gentiles. So then when we read the 11th chapter and the 10th chapter and the 12th chapter, then we can absolutely certainly find the events, or then the flow of events, step by step formation. So then what can we understand of this section? Let's then firstly absolutely understand the importance of the leadership of China. Let's understand then the absolutely importance, the absolutely certainty, or then the certainty of this chapter of the section of the 9th, 10th, and 11th chapter in sections of the 12th. Why do we have then these related with China? It's very simple. During the time when Daniel then was resuming his services before the king, he then found himself as usual, because Daniel was very responsible, he was a statesperson. But not only this, he had a hint of tabernacling also in himself. Though he was hundreds of miles away from the Holy Land, he knew there would have later in the future a section of history where then tabernacling would be restored. He knew it. But prior of this time, the Messiah also coming later, Daniel knew at some point, it was then roughly 500 years later, then the Messiah came, and then from then on, then he started his 1,000 years of kingship. Then further on was 1,000 years of deceit, and further on, this is our time. Then the restoration period, it started then precisely in 2010 until prior of the autumn feast. We don't know precisely when the autumn feast is going to start, because as we know, it starts in a day and in a time where no man knows. It depends upon when the first sliver of the lunar view then shows up in heaven, and then we will know when this precise day then starts. But we know for sure, since the spring feast is 490 days, it's half of the instructions, half of the prophets, then we know for sure the second half is also 490 days precisely. So then, what can we understand of China on the 11th chapter? Prior of going through the main section of the 11th chapter, where the entire world is involved, liking it or not, depending upon if a person has a religion or not, if with religion or not religion, The world must be involved with these holy instructions because they were given from a time where then a revelation of the end was then given. This then shows us a very important part from the hand of the Creator because He cares and He wants the end of this age. So let's try to understand then what went on with Daniel on the 10th chapter, where then you find yourself studying Daniel and his services before the king. And then he was obviously searching for more because he knew in his spirit there was more coming regarding the holy instructions. So then, as he finished his workday, he usually would take his path and go into the river, where he would then take a nap, and then he would rest for some time. He did this many times. And during the time he was taking a nap, he was given then special revelations of the time of the end. As Daniel then did this for many times, there were times in his life where he finished his workday, he went to the river, he had taken a nap, and he was not receiving any more instructions. So then Daniel, day after day after day after day, he felt in his spirit something else was then going on, and he did not know what those were. So then he set himself then a desire of fasting, because he felt in his spirit that this particular time was then requiring of some sort of fasting, where then he would have to take himself away from any kind of a pleasure and then spend his time in prayer and then in fasting. And it was very long, because he was more than 20 days of fasting, and then afterwards came then the revelation. And this revelation was then precisely of China. Let's understand in a couple of situations. As we find then ourselves studying these holy documents, because they are, in quote, our roadmap for this time, because we have not even 20 years left of this age. We are then in 7013, and then Tishri is the month where we are at, and precisely then you find these calculations very precise, and we have then 10 plus 9 years of this age yet. This time then we can have the privilege of studying then the 10th chapter, because Daniel was then receiving these instructions during his time. So let's understand how this plays. Daniel was receiving this 10th chapter because back then, as we understand, there were no chapters and no numbers. Those were contents of instructions. This is truly related with the Gentile level, mostly. But then, these instructions, they were tested. They were truly tested when they were taking place. How do we understand this? From the time of Daniel until the legs of iron, whatsoever Daniel received during his time, these instructions were then tested. There were nations that were acting and they were playing a part in these instructions and completing them during the time where then Daniel received those information, and then later those were then tested and retested for many years. These were then projected. How do we understand this projection? It's the same as if you would read then Leviticus the 23rd chapter, where then Shaliach Shaul mentioned the shadow prophetic events of the instructions or the Torah. Those were then projected, were they not? We are then during the time of the second half, are we not? And we understand then each year they must celebrate a specific feasts of the Creator Himself, but these were then projected. As they were projected regarding tabernacling, so those areas related with the Gentiles were also projected. Both of them then tried and they experienced then the events. And during the time of the first section where they experienced those areas, they were not aware of during their time that what they were experiencing would then later be used again. How can we explain this? Yirmiyahu the prophet gives us very precisely those areas. But then Yirmiyahu was a person where then the people did not understand him. Those people, they were ignorant. But Yirmiyahu knew what he was talking about. He was extremely important, and he gave us many times projections of his time and then our time, and prior of our time, then they were tested and retested many times. How can we then understand this factor? Read then the 10th chapter. Read the 11th chapter. These chapters are then related with places during the time where those prophecies were then completed at first, while then they would be projected in the future at the same time, however with other names. The 11th chapter is precisely related with the restoration period. Restoration period means the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste from many centuries. During this time, not only the holy cities would be then restored, but the Gentile level was also then restored. This means every nation will be in line with these instructions, liking it or not. Let's give some facts. So then China has done it again, and they closed the deal with Venezuela this last Sunday, where then they closed 12 deals with Venezuela. Not only this, but only as we can understand then, China as a country, as a nation, and the Eastern Kingdom, as you read the 11th chapter, if you have then the proper instructions, the proper holy instructions, not the Greco-Romans. The Greco-Romans were ignorant. That's why so many countries are ignorant of the times and the seasons, because they always are mockers. If you then speak the holy instructions with people with the wrong instructions, they always mock, because they are from a mocking origin. They are not worthy yet of what's coming. However, as they hear the holy instructions and they themselves repent for what they have done, and they begin to read as facts as the holy instructions can give us, then they will become acquainted with the Gentile level, because there is no religion in the holy instructions other than what the Messiah has said. They should be concerned with widows and orphans. This is what they should be doing. As far as tabernacling, there is no religion either. Those are actions. So then, let's find then what we stand at, as we also understand China is making a deal with Microsoft related with gaming. But the main objective of Microsoft is not truly gaming. They are aiming themselves as Microsoft as a company for the computer yet coming in the future. These will give us then a portable or a stationary unit where then transactions throughout the world can be used on real time, and taxation of many nations can be then deducted instantly. We are explaining a situation where then when you read the 11th chapter, you find the United States as the despised one. This despised one is then giving us a very important point, because as we read Yirmiyahu the prophet, and Yirmiyahu, it was absolutely amazing. After the Messiah, he is the most important prophet of the holy instructions. He was absolutely amazing. He was reading then holy instructions with a multi-layer, compacted, consistent, but yet very condensed information regarding tabernacling, regarding Gentile level, and regarding also those projections, plus the time of the restoration and the autumn feast. Let's understand then how God could use then, for instance, a nation, for instance, Italy. Italy is a nation that's broken. Italy is bankrupt. So as the Greco country, both of them are bankrupt. So then if they think they have some sort of a God they can watch after their countries, a person has to be real stupid to read their own translations, because their translations truly do not work. As they are becoming more aware of their own stupidity, they begin to search for another type of instructions where they can read facts. They don't have to do their do's and don'ts then to be taken into the heavens, because what they have learned thus far made them stupid. There is no other word of using it. However, when we read then the holy instructions as per the Israelic lineage, then you find facts. Facts are those areas where then absolutely without religion you can understand what's coming in the future. So then, let's read then what China has done. Also, besides then Microsoft then and China becoming more as one unit, not only this, China has closing more deals around the world, up to the point of helping Germany dealing with the Eurozone, because the prophet Daniel said nations would try to adhere to each other but they would not. This means that the Eurozone must at some point be then broken. And because of Cyprus being part of the Eurozone, when then they requested 12 digits plus of bailout, and Germany was resentful on giving them, then China has rescued Cyprus with 500 times 6 digits. So then Cyprus has in fact broken itself away from the Eurozone. Thus then, whatsoever Daniel the prophet has said is true. They would try to adhere to each other, but they would not. Thus then, Cyprus is the very evidence of the breaking of the Eurozone. Not only this, other countries are also in a line to get and make a deal with China. Do we understand this properly? Yes, we are becoming more aware of it. Not only this, but then continue on with the 11th chapter. You find then that Daniel was during the time of Darius the Mede. He was a very powerful king. And then as he was receiving these instructions, because as you can understand, the 10th chapter and the 11th chapter, they are together. They are during the time of the fasting of Daniel. The 11th chapter, 10th chapter, and the 12th chapter. These were given as one during the time of the fasting of Daniel, because this truly is the main bulk of the time of the end. So then, we read then those kingdoms, the kingdom of the East, China, kingdom of the North, you find the Soviet Union, and the kingdom of the South is then Africa. Then you find the despised one, meaning United States, because has extended itself beyond the time limit of 2010. As the king of Babylon had extended himself beyond the head of gold, and he made an entire statue for himself, did he not? And didn't work, did it? So then, as the United States is going to try to extend itself, the situation is going to be they are going to overextend themselves, where they won't be able to put up with the system, and then they will become the despised one. However, what is the relationship of then the despised one and then what the prophet Yeshayahu said in chapter 1:8? Woe to the land beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Precisely then Congo. Congo has a vast area of mineral resources, rare materials, extremely important for technology. Technology regarding Daniel has to do with trade. There is no other understanding other than trade. Trade is linked 100% with Congo. And then obviously when we read then what is the link of then Congo and United States, you can simply scrutinize the instructions and understand. Daniel was explaining then later on the 12th chapter, where then the angel said to him, and the knowledge would increase. He was explaining in Daniel, you would have a time of to and fro. People would be then lost, a time of deceit. Holy cities were no more. Then at the end of the 1,000 years of deceit, knowledge would increase for the purposes of trade, because you have to layer then with Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, where then the sticks of authority of the Ishmael and Yitzhak must be then granted. So then what is the link of the United States and Congo? Very simply, is the fact of then Congo in itself has enough minerals and riches they can sustain themselves. At the moment the nation is divided, understandably. However, what is then United States link with it? It's very simply because of the system. The USD is yet the most popular monetary system throughout the world. Only with the US authority and release of the system comes then a new system of the world's market, where the US then authorizes this system without war. So then what this can mean? This can only mean an answer and an answer only. When you read the despised one linked with the Congo is related with the system of the trade of the end. Because you have then USD and you have military and you have trade at the same time, you have to have the authorization of the former leader of the world's market to move on with this new system. This is the only link you can establish from the despised one in Congo. So then we can understand one situation only. US will come up with a computer, a very strong and powerful computer, where then the most important system will be placed in it, where then China's system will be used with this system. They're going to explain later. Please stay tuned.